Hi there, my name is Rebecca Hoyt, and thank you for joining me for Fotog Friday. Today I'm going to walk you through the wedding day and talk about the lenses that I love to use throughout the day. I'm still building my lens collection, and I'm in my third wedding season, and it's really taken me a while to figure out my shooting style and what lenses best suited me. I used to rent the 24-70 2.8 for all of my weddings. I still do from time to time, but I used to dream of owning that and the 70-200. But I've over time found that I'm actually an all prime shooter, and I absolutely love shooting primes. So the only lenses I own are prime lenses, and that's pretty much all I ever plan to own. They've just been so wonderful for me, and that's what I love. So as of right now, I own a 35mm 1.4, a 50mm 1.4, an 85 1.4, and a 105mm macro lens. There's two other lenses that I'm planning on purchasing this year, the 24 1.4 to get that nice wide angle lens, and then a 135 2.0 that Nikon has, just to give me a little bit more distance for ceremonies, especially when I'm restricted to the back of the church and I don't have as much flexibility to move around. I know if you're starting out, you may be listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, that's a lot of lenses, a lot of money. I totally understand, and it's taken me a while to get where I am. I mean, I'm in my third year of shooting, and for the longest time, I only owned my 50 and a 105 2.0, and that was it. That was all I was shooting with. I would rent the 24-70. It was like $40 for the weekend, and that's all I had. And I am a firm believer that you can get by with what you have. So don't be discouraged. I think if you have like a good prime lens, either a 50 if you're shooting full frame or a 35 if you're shooting crop sensor, that's the best place to start. And honestly, if you had to, you could shoot an entire wedding day on that lens alone. The reason I have other lenses is because, of course, it's nice to have versatility, and it's really helpful to capture things with different lenses to give different perspectives. So I'm going to walk through each section of the day, talk about what I use. I know that it's not the right way. There are some people that may argue or do things entirely differently, which is awesome. Everyone has their own style. As an all prime shooter, I don't use like a 70-200 or a 16-55 or anything like that. I only used fixed focal length lenses. So you may be very different, and that's awesome, and I'd love to hear how you shoot. This is the way that works for me, and hopefully it'll give you some insight to my day as well. So we'll start with details. Details are anything from the getting ready details, like the dress, the shoes, the bouquet, and then also the details you see at the reception. So centerpieces, place cards, gifts, all of those things, all of the reception details. My go-to lenses for that are my 50mm 1.4 and my macro lens. I'll also have something wider like the 35, or when I purchased it, the 24, to get a nice big room shot at the reception, but I'm mostly shooting details with my 50 and my macro. That's because the 50 gives you a nice, like, what you see is what you get perspective, and of course, it's a prime lens, so it drops down to 1.4 and can take, beautiful, shallow depth of field images to capture all the details. And then, of course, the macro lens supplements that well to be able to get really close up on different things. I use the macro lens for ring shots and things like that as well. Then we move into getting ready shots. Pretty much for the most part, I'll shoot with the 50mm, but if it's a small room, I'll have the 35 as well. That gives me a little more space to be able to kind of back up and capture the whole room, especially because a lot of times bridal suites are pretty tight spaces. Following that, we'll talk about bride and groom portraits, and this can be anything from the first look and then also my portrait time with them. My favorite portrait lenses are my 50 and my 85. 85 is a beautiful portrait lens, and I love shooting with it. 50 is awesome. It's a great all-around lens. And then sometimes I'll bring the 35 with me as well, just to have something to capture things a little bit wider and capture the setting. But for the most part, all of my portraits are with the 50 and the 85. And then when I'm taking bridal party pictures or family pictures, depending on the size of the group, if I can shoot with the 50, I will. If I need to fit a lot of people in a small space, I'll drop down to the 35. I really don't like to use the 24, only because the ends of the image can really start to be distorted, and if you have people spanning that picture, the people on the ends with a 24mm lens can start to look kind of stretched out. So I try and avoid that if possible, back up as much as I can, and shoot family and bridal party pictures with the 35. And then you move to the ceremony. It's key for me to have a 24 during the ceremony, so that if I'm in the back or if I'm up in the balcony, I can capture a nice big room shot. if it's indoors or just a nice big scenic shot outside to kind of show the setting of the ceremony. And then this is why I'm planning on purchasing a 135. As of right now, my longest distance lens is my 85, and it's beautiful, and I always use that if it's a long aisle for processionals. But it's not quite long enough for me to be able to not quite be in everyone's way and still get the close-up shots that I want, especially when the bride and groom are exchanging vows. So having a 24, my 85, and then once I purchase it, the 135 are my ceremony lenses, and I'm really, really excited to use those. Following that, we have the reception, and I already talked about the reception details, but after that, once the details are shot, depending on the size of the room, for first dance and intros and all of those types of things, I'll use the 50 and the 85. Once those events are done and once you kind of get into the mingling and the party atmosphere, I'm pretty much mostly shooting at this point with my 35. Once I purchase the 24, that's the main reason I want the 24 is most of the dancing pictures, the party pictures I'll be taking with the 24mm. And the 35 is great too. If you don't want as much distortion or if the dance floor isn't super crowded, you have some room to move back and forth, 35 is a great option for that as well. And then lastly, there's other random things like exit shots. I usually try and shoot those as wide as possible, again without distortion, especially if it's like a sparkler exit. That way you get the environment and you're not just focusing on the bride and groom. So usually I'll shoot something like that with a 35 or a 50, just depending on what the setting is, like how many people are outside. The reason that I'm kind of explaining this is because I show up to a wedding with two bags. One, I leave set down. That's what I have my, speed lights in, all my batteries and chargers and all of that. Those are where the lenses that I'm not currently using go. The lenses that I just listed for you, those are the ones I carry on me. I have a shooting bag. I always have that on my person or sitting right next to me by my feet. During the ceremony, it's on me. And that way I have all the lenses I need in that moment of the day. So I basically go through this list just like I went with you, and I figure out what part of the day I'm walking into and what lenses I needed, and that way I'm not constantly carrying around 6 lenses because my poor back would just be broken. So hopefully this was helpful for you. If you're starting out, don't be discouraged. I would just encourage you to rent a couple things, see what you like. Take your time making your purchases because you may find something that you dreamt of owning a couple years ago may not be a good fit for you. I have no plans of buying the 24 to 70, and I used to rent it for every wedding, actually really until this year. And I'm just realizing it's just not fitting my style anymore, and that's okay. But that's what the great thing about doing rentals is you can try stuff, see what you like, and see what works for you, and then make some really informed investments, and I guarantee you'll be happy. So hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful Friday and a fantastic weekend.
Don't sweat the technique.